Welcome back to the Student Hub Live orientation programme for ECUS. And in this session, we're looking at education studies with the primary team. And I'm delighted to welcome Kim to the studio, who is a lecturer in primary education and works on E103 and also the new third level module, E309. Fiona is a lecturer as well who works with Kim in the primary team and has also been working on E209. There are lots of these numbers and things, but you don't need to worry about them. I'll explain in a bit. And Helen is an associate lecturer, one of the wonderful tutors that we were talking about earlier, who works on pretty much most of the programme. I think it's fair to say. And also we were speaking earlier about how tutors often have a lot of experience in addition to being tutors for the Open University. And outside the OU, you have also worked in ITT and with a teacher in CPD in Wales and on the Masters in Educational Practice programme. So you have a very broad repertoire. And welcome to everybody at home, those of you just joining us. This is a live interactive session. It's all about welcoming you to the university, answering questions, and you can watch this on catch up as well. So enjoy the show, relax, talk to each other, and know that if there's something that you want to rewind, it will all be available on our YouTube channel in addition to many other things that we've done both for the school and for the university, so you can always catch up on things later. HJ and Sultana will take any questions and we'll put those to our panel in the studio, so please do ask questions of our guests. Fiona, I wonder if I may start with you and ask, who are students who study primary studies? We've spoken before about there being a very diverse population of OU students. What are the primary studies students like?
Absolutely. So our student body is really diverse. We have students who have just finished school and are coming straight to us. We have students who finished school a few years ago, some who finished more than a few years ago, they'd admit themselves, and have been working and raising families and so on ever since. We have students who maybe left school with the equivalent of GCSE or standard grades, who maybe went on to A-levels or highers. Some have been to college already, some have been to university already and are joining us. So the range is immense. Our students range in age from 18 to 65, so the full spectrum. So you can imagine and appreciate the wealth of experience and knowledge that they bring with them to the module, and that's hugely valuable to us because that richness is incredible. Because throughout all of the modules, they have these opportunities to talk and to share and compare, and those conversations make us completely unique. We know that 3/4 of our students are working as well, either full-time or part-time. Lots of our students have voluntary positions and are carers and have families to raise. Those students who are working, lots of them are already working in education, lots are in school, they're teaching assistants or support assistants. Sometimes they're in education but not in school, so maybe in a local council, or they're working in the charity sector or the voluntary sector. Others are in a completely unrelated field. So just in the last few days, I've been talking to a couple of new students, one of whom is a paramedic and one of whom is an estate agent. So some of our students are making big career changes, and that's why they've come to the qualification. And again, you get all these different perspectives, all these different voices, and that's so valuable. Our students are across the UK and the 4 nations, and we also have a small but growing number who are overseas. We know that at the minute, most of our students are women. I think it's something as high as 88%. And that's really a reflection, I think, of the sector more broadly. We know that in primary education, particularly in primary schools, that the number of men, the men are really in the minority. There's, I think in England, it's something like 15% are men. So, but the numbers are rising here for us. We have increased our number of male students hugely in the last few years, and that's a trend that we want to continue. So I think really in all, our students are completely unique. I don't think any other institution has students like we do, and that is something that is so important and valuable to us.
No, it's amazing. And I think everyone is got, whilst there is this diversity, so many people are trying to squeeze their study in with life.
Absolutely.
And that's why events like this are so valuable, because people can share advice and tips, and they often think they're the only one who's maybe trying to juggle all these balls, but actually so many people are in the same boat.
Absolutely, juggling is a key feature.
Kim, with that in mind, Fiona's spoken about the very diverse student body, and diversity is something that's really important both to the department in terms of curriculum and also the student body. Can you tell us how you value diversity in the programme?
Well, As we've been saying, our students bring with them a really diverse and wide range of influences and experiences within their lives. So we use that as our starting point for developing our modules and developing our resources. Our modules start with learning activities and resources that ask students about their experiences, that go from where they are, so that we can ensure that they make progress in their study by drawing on their experiences, both professional, both personal and educational. But our diversity, we need to value our diversity because we are about children's learning, and in order to understand and support children to make progress, we need to learn about diversity of children's experiences as well. So students will learn about children in a wide range of situations and a wide range of learning environments. So we look at how they will be able to make progress, and students can learn from that by learning about themselves.
And can you tell us about the Level 1 module, E103? And for students who are new to the Open University, we often have these numbers which will often denote some sort of field. So E is for education and 1 is Level 1. Specifically, we spoke about how this diversity underpins modules. How does that work in E103, the Level 1 module?
Well, linking back to what I was saying about drawing on students' own experiences, E103 starts early on with a study topic called Autobiography and Learning, which encourages students to reflect on their past experiences so that they can identify their own transferable skills and see the strengths that they bring to their study. And from there we move on to a personal development planning activity, which is about supporting students to ensure that they complete their studies and they're successful in their studies. And that starts by identifying those transferable skills as their individual strengths. Then they go on to thinking about what areas they might need to develop that they're not so sure about in terms of their study skills and their learning. Then they think about their own individual circumstances, so the challenges that they might experience in their own individual life in terms of developing and moving forward with their studies, which gives them an opportunity to think about how they're going to address those. And one of the areas that many of us find quite challenging at times is the area of academic writing. So we've developed a resource which we call the self-assessment checklist. And in that checklist there are all the different aspects of academic writing that you need to include in order to complete your assignments on E103. And so as students are kind of completing their assignment, they can look at the different areas and think, have I included that? Did I feel really confident about including that area of my academic writing? And if not, well, I can kind of say, no, I wasn't so confident. And that becomes something that you can talk to your tutor about, how you're going to develop that in your next assignment or as you go through. Another aspect, going back to children and the importance of children's learning, which is what we're all about on primary, there's a really wide range of study topics which are focused on children's diversity. So we look at the importance of developing positive and supportive relationships between adults and children in primary education. We look at children's identity, the diversity of their identity and the way that those can impact on their learning. We look at inclusion, which is not just about special educational needs and disabilities, important as those issues are, supporting the individual learner. But also we have study topics which are about observing children and listening to and talking to children so that we can ensure that they're making progress in their learning by working from where they are and moving forward.
Thank you, Kim. I wonder if we could talk about how that plays out then for the students, because Kim's given us a wonderful account of so many of the broad theoretical aspects. How do students then actually get to grips with some of this material, Helen?
I think there's a number of different ways they can do that, and obviously my colleagues here are mentioning about the whole sort of diversity aspect. It's wonderful for us as tutors to have such a range of experiences of people coming into the Open University, and I think people sometimes worry that they have no experience working with children or dealing with children. That's absolutely fine, because these modules are designed in a way to increase both your knowledge and understanding, but also your skills that you will develop as well. One of the aspects of 103 and 209 and 309 as well is the whole aspect to do with placements and the opportunity to undertake placements within schools. That gives people a unique perspective into how what they're studying about actually relates to what they're actually seeing in practice. And that's one of the themes that we look at throughout the primary programme, in that relationship between theory, policy and practice. And sometimes I often think that people working in schools have what I call a eureka moment. And they have a moment where they, all of a sudden, they may have been working with children for a long time, or they actually may have just started working with children, but they see children doing something or learning in a certain way, and it makes sense to them because of something that they looked at in the materials. They understand why something is designed the way it is. So I would say take advantage of those placement opportunities. They're really incredibly important for giving you that sense of perspective, relating theory to the practice.
And some students were saying before, you know, they're getting to grips with their material. For the level 1 students, there's so much to get into.
There is.
What would your advice be as a tutor in terms of how they pace themselves?
Okay, a few things I would say immediately. You do not have to read it all at once. That's the important thing, first of all. You don't read it all at once. These are not courses where there is an exam at the end for an hour and a half. So you don't have to remember. But there's a few things that I think are really useful to consider as in level 1 and level 2 and 3 as well. First of all, the courses have been designed in such a way so they integrate development of knowledge and understanding, but also skill development. So go through them in order. Stick to the weeks, if you can, where you've got the material to look at. So week 1 material, try and look at that within week 1, etc. A few things that can really help, and I've just got a couple of resources here, and they're a little bit battered because the mic op is. But basically what we've got here, and this is the E103 materials, we've actually got a study book, and there's also material online as well. We've got the study book, and we've also got 2 readers. I brought one of them here. Now you'll notice at the top that I've got little bits of fairly tattered now green stick-it note, but sometimes it's useful to try and link together the material inside the reader and inside the study book. So what I do is I have, for a particular block, I will use, say, for example, green stick-it notes, and I will identify the green bits in here with the relevant chapters inside here. Because one of the things that it's important to do throughout all of the courses, but more important for level 1, is actually putting together all the different ideas that you're going to come across. And sometimes there's so much information in different places. If you've got a shortcut where you can actually know, oh, that chapter here, I know that I did that in block 1 because it's a green stick-it note or a yellow stick-it note. That can be really, really useful. But again, going back to the point that you don't need to read it all at once. The courses have been designed in a really clever, progressive way.
Because as Kim was saying, that reflective aspect is so important, and you know, you can't get that if you plough through a book. We could all read a book in a week effectively, but it's that space that you need to reflect on things and make links, as you say.
I think that there's 2 processes that are really important to think about is by reflecting on the materials, reflecting on your own experiences, if you can manage to undertake those placements. Reflecting on those and being, I wouldn't say critical, and it's not critical in a negative sense, but just taking a judgment about what you're seeing and why you might be seeing that. Those 2 skills, reflectivity and criticality, are really important skills that we start to develop in level 1, and then they're increasingly important within level 2 and then at level 3.
Perfect. Thank you, Helen. I want to take a quick trip to our hot desk and see how everyone is at home. HJ and Sultana, how are things?
Well, we've got a lot going on. Jane just said she really likes the idea of putting sticky notes throughout the book to be able to go back and know what she's gone through before. And Nia really likes this topic as well because she's actually started on the equality, participation and inclusion module. So a lot of this is interesting her as well. But myself and Sultana have two great questions for you. Nazim has a great one. Says, I'm finding it hard to get placements in schools, trying a lot of schools, not getting much luck. Is there any advice you'd have while they're studying?
I don't know if you've had a chance to visit the subject website. We have a big section on there with lots and lots of guidance and resources to help you get a placement. We've got a letter, for example, that you can take to schools that explains what we're asking students to do and the support they're getting from here. So the subject website is definitely the best place to start. If they're still having difficulties, drop onto one of the forums on whichever module you're studying and the tutors will help them too.
And I think a useful thing as well is to actually, when you're going into school, is actually say not only why you're there, but schools always need an extra pair of hands. So volunteer to come in and do some reading, and that might be a way into schools. Schools, won't necessarily, they may have other requirements, they may have other challenges that they've got going on, but schools invariably need an extra pair of hands at some stage. So if you go in with that sort of, that sort of focus, sometimes you can get lucky.
And it's about what you can give to them.
That's right. It's what you can contribute, because schools are busy places. So if you can go in with what I can contribute to your school rather than what the school can do for you, that helps.
Yes, absolutely. Did you have some other questions?
Yes, we've got one more from a student who's studying E102 and E103 at the same time. They currently work part-time and have a 10-month-old baby and another one due in December. So they've looked at the timescales of activities and they're saying it doesn't seem to add up to 35 to 40 hours, which student support obviously advised studying 2 modules. So what would you advise a student? Does it really take up to 35 to 40 hours of study a week? Or?
I think this comes back to not just reading the material. It comes back to the assimilation of the material. It comes back to the reflecting on the material, doing the learning notes, joining in the forums, all sorts of activities that would build up to that. So it's not just about reading, it's about thinking about how the material online, in the book and in the readers link together. And so it does tend to build up more than you realise.
Yeah, and I'm going to talk to our tutors about the study intensity, because that does sound like quite a high load, and how one might manage some of that in a later session. But right now, if we might move on, because I'm really keen to focus on the different levels within the programme. So level 2, E209, how might that then go on to develop the subject? What might students look forward to in level 2 then? Fiona?
E209 is really focused on the development of subject knowledge across 4 areas, across maths, English, science and computing, and about how that subject knowledge can be used to support children's learning, because as Kim said, that's our focus, it's on children. As I said earlier, we know that lots of students' previous study will differ. So what they studied, when they studied, and the level they took that study to will differ. So they'll come into 209 with really different needs about their subject knowledge. We might have some students who come to us with particular anxieties in certain areas. It's not uncommon to hear somebody say, I'm terrified of maths, or fractions always got to me, or they might have a blind spot for poetry, or never experienced science at school, or computational thinking might seem alien, because computing's only been on primary curriculum for a few years, so lots of our students never experience that as a learner at all. And that's absolutely fine. We recognise that completely. Because how you begin E209 is we ask our students to carry out subject knowledge audits, which can seem a little bit daunting. It kind of feels like doing tests, but that's not what it's about. What it's about is about helping our students to identify those strengths and those areas for development. Because from those audits, they set themselves targets. These are the targets they're going to work towards in the different areas. They're going to pick 2 for each subject, and that's what they're going to develop over the course of the module. And those targets are personal, they're unique, they're not anybody else's targets, they're their own. And our tutors like Helen are here to help the students craft those targets, to make them focused, make them challenging but achievable. And they'll take those through the whole module. And when it comes to doing the tutor marked assignments, the TMAs, and this goes back to what Helen was saying earlier, each one of those has a really big reflective component. That's a really big part of what our students are doing. They are reflecting on how their subject knowledge has developed and how that can go on and be used to help support children in the classroom. And that idea of reflection it's paramount to everything that we do here. And when we talk about reflection, it's a word that we band around an awful lot. What we're saying is it's about stopping and thinking explicitly about things that we don't normally stop and think about. It's about consciously going back and considering our actions, our experiences, our responses to things, our thoughts and our feelings, and about learning from them. And in this context, about making connections between our experiences, what we see and experience in the classroom, and what we read about and what we learn about in the module materials. So building those connections. And as Helen touched on earlier, it's about building those connections and doing so in context. So this idea of spending time in practice, spending time in a school or an early years environment is really key. And we ask our students to do that across all three of our kind of core modules. On E209, though, we add to that. We have gone out and recorded lots of audio and video material. We visited different schools and we include that in the material so that not only do students get to experience their own placements, but they get to see how other people are doing things. So we're looking at the diverse ways of doing it and reflecting on those. And that experience in the classroom, particularly for our students who are thinking of going on to do teaching, which isn't everybody, but a lot of them do, that experience is really essential.
Perfect. No, thank you. And obviously getting that experience and placement in the classroom will be invaluable, but we've spoken about that, and because we're running short on time, I just want to move on to level 3 so that students get some sort of sense of what's in store for them then. E309 then is Comparative Studies in Primary Education, which was in its first presentation this year. So again, could you just give us a very short, brief overview about what students might look forward to? Because this is very important, again, in terms of diversity, the subject that we started on.
Absolutely. With E309, students are really exploring learning and teaching around the world, and they're looking at the social, the political, the economic, the cultural factors that influence education. Really at its heart, it's about recognising and valuing the diverse and different ways of doing things and the different experiences that learners and teachers have. So we visit people, we visit places, we visit institutions in all kinds of places, in developing economies and transitions, highly developed countries. Sometimes we use a very close-up lens, and we zoom in on individual classrooms, individual educators. Other times we step back and we look at the bigger, the social, political factors that influence education in that context. We visit all kinds of places. We go to Singapore and look at high achieving schools. We look at Danish forest schools. We have a look at the education of refugees in Kenya and their learner-centred approach. We look at Indigenous education in the subarctic in Canada. We go to Sierra Leone, Uganda, New Zealand, Australia, Northern Ireland, Scotland. We take a proper road trip and we really have a look at how things happen in different places. And as I said, key is about recognising and valuing the diverse and different ways of doing things.
Yeah. Kim, can you just tell us very briefly about specifically how diversity is looked at? There's a whole block, isn't there? Inclusion and inclusive education.
That's right. I wrote block 3, which is inclusion and inclusive education, and that is picking up on what Fiona said before about the close-up lens. That's really the close-up block of the module, where we focus in on the individual experiences of children as learners, of primary practitioners and the people that are involved with them, and parents and carers as well. So there's 4 weeks. Week 13 is about notions of inclusion and inclusive education. So that's when we look at the language. What do these words mean? What's the history behind it? Why did these ideas become important? And then we also look at how that's now translated in different countries so that we can compare what inclusion and inclusive education looks like in different countries. Week 14, that's the real close-up focus, because that's about identity and learning. Children have multiple identities. So going back to what I said about special educational needs and disability, important as those factors are, and we do look at that in week 14 as well, but there are other aspects of children's lives and identities that really influence their learning, like refugee experiences, migration experiences, and also there was another aspect that was really important, and it's gone out of my head right now. So.
About comparing two different experiences, some of the assessment tasks that students have as comparing on PowerPoint, isn't it? Different experiences.
Yes, that's right. So one of the things that students do, they draw on from week 14, is the assessment experience at the end is students look at, they compare two aspects of children's identity. That was another one that we look at, religious affiliation of children, how that can impact on their learning. So they look at two aspects of children's identity that might affect their learning experiences, and they compare that in two different countries, and they present their learning, their understanding in a PowerPoint presentation. And to support that, we focus on a different country, as well as drawing on a range of countries. We do an in-depth focus on a different country in each week. So we look at inclusion, inclusive education in Scotland, in Canada, in South Africa, and in India. And we have a wide range of audio-visual resources that we've developed to support that. So we're listening to practitioners, we're listening to children in classes, we're listening to parents and carers.
Yeah.
So we've got a wide range of resources to support that understanding.
Perfect. Kim, thank you so much. It sounds so exciting. I don't know how
It
level
is.
1 students are going to wait all those years, but it's a wonderful vision, I guess, you've given for those students who are at that early stage. And like you said, you know, right at the start, take your time, get to grips with things.
Absolutely.
And there will be so much crossing over, and you can see how these themes evolve and feed onto each other at levels 2 and 3 and become more and more interesting and specific.
Please ask, you know, if you're just starting off, you will have lots of questions that everybody else will have as well.
Yes.
Please contact your tutor.
Yes.
If you've got any queries, please go to the module forums.
Yes.
There's people on there. There are no silly questions. Please contact tutors with any problems.
Thank you. And if you're watching live, you can put those questions in the chat box and we will do our best to answer them. Thank you so much, Kim, Fiona and Helen, for that session. Well, we've got a lot of new students here today, so we're going to show you a short video, which is one of our campus tour videos. We're broadcasting live from the Open University in Milton Keynes, and we've got a wonderful campus here, which you're very welcome to come and attend. So we're going to show you some snippets of that. Then we're going to return for our session on Student Voice, where I'll be talking to some students who are both current and graduated. So I'll see you in a few minutes.